Hello there guys, what is going on? Son of Chelsea back here again for another edition of Let's Talk Chelsea. Hope you're all doing well on this Thursday and keeping safe. Basically now it's under a week till the Premier League resumes, the restart, which I'm excited about, I have to admit. Now I know it is a little bit longer until Chelsea play their first game away at Aston Villa, and I'll be doing my team selector for that game, which is before the game, about a day before the game. I'm giving you my predicted lineup, which is going to be very difficult considering all the circumstances. But hopefully Frank Lampard will do some sort of press conference before then, and then of course the rational perspective after the game. So if you're new to the channel, a new subscriber, which I've had a lot during lockdown, that's sort of the way I go about previewing and reviewing games. So make sure, if you're not subscribed already, hit that subscribe button and a notification bell so you never miss all that content, because there's going to be so much because of the rapid rate of Premier League games. But I'm excited for it, and let's get into it firstly with some players that are going to be involved, hopefully, in those games for Chelsea, and that is Pedro and Willian. Now, there's a little bit of confusion around their future, as you can see here, reported by Matt Law in the Telegraph, because Chelsea are still waiting to find out whether or not Willian and Pedro will sign contract extensions to play for the club past the 30th of June, with the pair worried over what will happen if they suffer serious injuries. Telegraph Sport understands both players are open to the prospect of signing extensions to the end of the season, but progress has been held up over what would happen if either player sustained an injury that could leave them without a club. We know Pedro has been linked to Roma, and I think that'd be a really good move for him. Of course, Willian has been linked away, and it is a concern, and I think it's going to be a major concern for Frank Lampard. And the point I'm going to make about this is, don't think about next season. When we talk about Willian and Pedro and we talk about improving the first team squad, refreshing that area, which I agree with, don't focus on next season. Focus on the remaining games of this season that Chelsea have got ahead, because Willian and Pedro have been key players for Frank Lampard, especially Willian. Willian's been a key player, but just look at the last two games that Chelsea played. Both Willian and Pedro were essential in those games. They really were. Willian scored in both. Pedro scored against Everton. I thought they were absolutely brilliant. Frank Lampard has leaned on their experience, and I still feel like they both could be key figures in the remaining games of Chelsea's season. I think both of them, especially Pedro, has got a track record of coming good at the end of a season because of his experience. Of course, very unique circumstances now. We don't know how players are going to react to this end to a season, which is very different to a normal end to the season, but still I think their experience can be leaned on, and especially Willian. Frank Lampard has leaned on Willian's experience a lot this season, and I think at times has been one of Chelsea's best players. And I know that's going to annoy some people, but I just think that's the truth. I think he has been a consistent performer. I think he's had a really decent season this year for Frank Lampard, when I think a lot of us expected he wasn't going to be as featured this season. I fully expect that both will leave at the end, but this has to be a concern for Chelsea and for Lampard, because if Lampard doesn't have Willian and Pedro for the remaining games, or at least past the 30th of June, it's going to be a big issue. It really is. Hopefully these contract extensions are just made, but I can understand a concern of players, especially Willian, I think, because Willian could be moving to a club like Tottenham, which of course we don't want to see. But Willian, of course, both of these players could potentially see themselves still as first team players. Sustaining injuries could of course throw that move in doubt. So please let me know your opinions. I feel like it will come to a resolution, hopefully a good one, where they do sign short contract extensions, because I think Chelsea just desperately need to get it done. So we do have those players just for the last few games in July, potentially August if we make the FA Cup final, and I think they both could be key figures for Chelsea and for Lampard in the conclusion of the season. So please let me know your opinions on this story in the comments below. Next is about Tammy Abraham and Timo Werner arriving from RB Leipzig. Now, I made this point when the news broke about Timo Werner last week, literally last week, when Matt Law broke that story about him coming to Chelsea, agreeing to come to Chelsea this summer. And then I sort of posed the question, how would that impact Tammy Abraham? How would that impact his play time, his future at Chelsea, with his contract situation still up in the air? And Liam Toomey and Simon Johnson for The Athletic reported on this issue that Chelsea apparently want Abraham and Timo Werner in the same starting 11. Sources have told The Athletic that there were no specific conversations with Abraham about Chelsea's decision to move for Werner before the deal was agreed and then leaked into the public domain. Lampard and his staff will, however, be watching their number 9 closely during training in the coming days and weeks to see how he reacts to the news. The feeling around Chelsea is that it'll be good for Abraham to feel pushed. That is the way it should be for clubs with the greatest resources and grandest aspirations. Then they go into Werner's tactical role for RB Leipzig and how that shifted and how actually that could benefit Tammy Abraham in being in the same 11. With Julian Nagelsmann often deploying Werner in front of the opposition defence more as a left-sided inside forward than a conventional on-the-shoulder striker. It has helped him become more a complete attacking threat, learning how best to exploit deep-lying opponents by drifting intelligently between the defensive lines, as well as using his explosive pace and acceleration to carve them open in transition. They also make a salient comparison between Tammy Abraham and Poulsen at RB Leipzig, how Poulsen are very, much more physical forward, and how him and Werner have really created a good relationship this season, and how comparatively that could work at Chelsea between Abraham and Timo Werner. There's been some great videos on this by fellow Chelsea creators. Yannick made a video about this, how Timo Werner and Tammy Abraham can work together, and Onini's Blue Lions TV has made videos about this as well, so I think you should go and check them out and hear their opinions as well on this, because I think absolutely Tammy Abraham and Timo Werner could work together. I think that's why Frank Lampard and why Chelsea were looking for a wide forward, to have that option and versatility. I talked about flexibility in yesterday's video if you haven't seen it, mostly referring to Kai Havertz, but I think this very much relates to Tammy Abraham. And I think what was a really good point in this article by Liam Toomey and Simon Johnson is they talk at the start of the article referring to Frank Lampard when he returned to Chelsea in the summer of 2003. Now, in the summer of 2003, that was the summer where Roman Abramovich bought Chelsea and we bought a load of new players, and how Frank Lampard basically had two decisions. He could have left if he felt his position and future was in doubt at Chelsea. Of course, we know Frank Lampard made a decision to stay at Chelsea and become the club's greatest ever player over a number of years, and was an amazing player for Chelsea, and he really grew, especially when Jose Mourinho arrived. And I think the same mindset can be used by Tammy Abraham, and I hope, Tammy Abraham would use the same mindset for inspiration, because you get the sense Tammy's very confident in his own ability. He should be, because I think he's a very talented forward, and he's shown in spells this season that he can be a very good forward for Chelsea. And I think Frank Lampard has constantly stated about a meritocracy. I think he wants to give players opportunities, and Tammy to be... I've seen comments, and I think this is a great way to sort of confront this issue. I see a lot of comments on my videos about me praising young players, putting too much faith in young players. I want to see young players be given a chance. My simple thing is I just want there now to be a realistic path for young players to break into the first team. But as Lampard reiterates, he puts a lot of pressure on young players himself. If Tammy Abraham, if Mason Mount, if all these players aren't performing at the right levels, they shouldn't be in the first team. That's pretty simple. It's just about really having that opportunity. It's not for me that if you're a young player, you instantly get in ahead of anyone else. You need to be deserving that opportunity and be working hard to play for Chelsea and performing at an acceptable level. But at the same time, I think Tammy should use this as inspiration to become a better forward, to prove himself again, to prove why he's been Chelsea's top goal scorer this season, and to add on those numbers as well. I think Werner can upgrade Tammy Abraham's game even more if he is played as a left-sided forward like he is more at Leipzig, and Tammy can sort of be that physical presence up top, and Tammy can add to his game as well and learn and get better with age. Of course, these contract negotiations drawing out a little bit more is of concern to Chelsea fans, because you do worry as long as it is drawn out and Tammy sort of waiting to see what happens next season. Now, him waiting to see, I don't think is a sign that he's just going to slack off and just admit defeat to Timo Werner taking his place. I think he just wants to see how it works out, which I think is a sensible move on his long-term career path, in truth, not just thinking just solely about Chelsea. But I think that everything I've heard from Tammy Abraham, the sense I get, I think he wants to be a big player for Chelsea. I think you'd be foolish at the moment to try and really pin down Frank Lampard's starting 11, his best starting 11, what his long-term formation is going to be at Chelsea, considering how much he's changed, but considering how much he's evolving and how much he's learning about his squad. I think it is a bit of a naive thing to sort of pin down and say, yeah, this is absolutely going to happen, because we don't know. Injuries, form, Hakim Ziyech may not turn out to be the brilliant player we hope he will be. Same with Timo Werner. Things can change. Christian Pulisic might be Chelsea's most important player next season. We don't know. That's why I think Tammy Abraham has absolutely got an opportunity next season to play alongside Timo Werner. And let's hope if that does happen and Chelsea are successful because of that, he signs that new contract, he extends his long-term future to Chelsea, and Chelsea benefit off it, really. So please let me know your opinions on Tammy Abraham. Do you think Tammy Abraham and Timo Werner will create a good partnership next season for Chelsea? Do you think that's the way Lampard will deploy both players, or do you think it's going to be a straight shootout between Timo Werner and Tammy Abraham for that number one forward position? Please let me know in the comments below. And lastly, just before I finish, Chelsea did play another friendly against Reading at Cobham this time instead of Stamford Bridge. Those preparations ramping up now. You see a bunch of sides in the Premier League playing warm-up games for next week. Pedro scored the only goal. I was talking about Pedro earlier and how big he could be for Frank Lampard in the remaining games. He scored the only goal, and Ruben Loftus-Cheek playing once again. Let's hope he can get some minutes in that 5-sub role. I think that's going to be really good for easing players like Loftus-Cheek back into the first team, because I think he could be absolutely absolutely massive for the rest of the season if he gets back to some sort of fitness and form. But that is it for today's edition of Let's Talk Chelsea. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch it. If you did enjoy it, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Follow me on Twitter at Son of Chelsea. Have a great day, and I'll see you again.